All right. So, once upon a time, the world had turned away from what God had intended it to be. So he decided to destroy all of it. But he also decided to save the last faithful person that was left on earth. Having been warned ahead of time, that person built a boat and filled it with his family and all different types of animals. Then the flood came and destroyed everything except for what was inside of that boat. And once the waters started receding, the boat landed on top of a mountain, and the people inside sent a succession of different animals to make sure that the earth was safe before they disembarked and then repopulated the planet. So that's the Noah story, right? What you probably didn't know is that is also many, many different stories from across the world. Make sure this thing, the jig works, I need to turn on. There it is. Here's my fancy little chart. So some of these stories are almost exactly the same as the Noah story. Some of them share certain elements. Some of them are nothing like it at all. But in every single culture, there is a flood story. There is a story of humanity being completely destroyed. There have been many different theories as to why this is true. Why does every culture have one of these stories? Some say that it is proof that there actually was a full world flood at some point, and that is why everybody has this story. Some say that it's just a very handy literary device that everybody can kind of connect to, and so everybody just uses it. And there are some who think that there was one localized flood that started the story, and then the story just branched out from there and went across the world. But every culture has one. And this is some of them.
Is that the number of stories, the number of flood stories, like 228?
No. So actually, that was out of 364.
There's 364 flood stories?
There are more than that.
Okay.
Those were the ones that I had access to at the time. Yeah, so like some of them were full world floods, all of those different things. And that's just the comparisons to the Noah story. Some of them have other similarities that aren't important right now. So we might never be really sure of what actually happened, if it was actually true or if it was just a story that got passed down through the generations. But that doesn't mean we can't learn from it. Stories serve a certain function and tell us about what it is to be human and what it is to live in the place where we live in our own culture. Especially long-lasting stories like flood stories, they're more than just purely entertainment. Stories help us answer questions like, where did we all come from? What happens after we die? Why do bad things happen? But they also are social commentary. They tell us about morality, inspiration, change, what it is to be a person in that culture. They help us teach our children how to learn what is right from wrong and how to live in the society that they're growing up in. Stories tell us what is valued, what is inappropriate, and what is expected of a person. So these flood stories take all of that to the absolute extreme. Some answer questions about creation, some tell us how people got dispersed throughout the planet and different languages came up. Some tell us why some animals are valued in certain cultures versus others. But the vast majority of them are about the complete destruction of the world because of the actions of humanity. Those actions that are highlighted as bad within the story is the reason that God decided to completely destroy the world. Humanity had gotten past the point of no return. There was no way to fix the problem, so the world had to be destroyed and started over from scratch. And the person or people who were saved because of their faith in their God and because of their good qualities. This was the seed of a brand new humanity, where God only kept the good qualities when he pressed the reset button. So, for example, the Maori of New Zealand have a flood story where there were only 2 prophets left who worshipped the creation deity, and they wanted to prove that that deity was still powerful and still deserved to be worshipped even though nobody else did. So they prayed to the deity. He caused a flood that destroyed everyone else and rewarded them for continuing their faithfulness. And then everybody else believed it. Not everybody was destroyed in that one. In the Palua Islands of Micronesia, the several gods, this is a polytheistic society, they came down to earth and disguised themselves as humans. And then they walked around the village and knocked on all the doors and asked for food and shelter. And everybody refused them. Finally, one woman brought them in, fed them, housed them, showed them hospitality. And so they warned her, on the next full moon, we're going to flood everything. So build a raft, go to sleep on it that night, and you'll be saved. And the rest of the new world came from her. In the Assyrian myth, which is near Israel, is actually found within the tale of Gilgamesh, which is the oldest known work of literature, the oldest known story that was written down on a tablet. In this one, the gods decided to cleanse the earth because humanity had become overpopulated. It actually says they got really rowdy and loud and disturbed the gods in heaven, and they just wanted them to be quiet. So one of the gods commits all the others to destroy humanity, but there was one outlier who's like, no, I want to save this one person. And she secretly went and told him to build an ark and put his family and all the animals in it. And he was the only one who was saved. And the other gods were actually very remorseful that they had killed everyone after the flood, and they thanked her for saving that one last person and ended up granting him immortality. So, by highlighting these extremes, by showing this is the one person who was hospitable, this was the one person who was faithful, this is the one person who the gods really liked. These stories show what that culture values, what they avoid, such as being unfaithful, being loud and rowdy and overpopulated, just not showing hospitality, and why these things are important. All of these things are the foundations of a functioning society. Society doesn't work unless we have rules that everybody agrees upon and follows. Otherwise, everything just turns into chaos. And there's a higher authority that will punish humanity if they don't comply to those rules. So in America, we have the judicial system. We know what the rules are. We follow them. We know somebody will punish us. In religion, we have the Bible that tells us how we should act, what we should do, and we know God is going to punish us if we don't do those things, or he's going to show mercy. Another example is the fairy tales and stories that we tell our kids, like the tale of the tortoise and the hare, which helps us teach children that dedication and perseverance are better than just being cocky and knowing that you can win even if you don't try. So, this knowledge of what is right and what is wrong is the basis for all of our beliefs and all of our behavior. We make choices based on what is acceptable in our society, whether that's complying to those rules or rebelling against them. And other members of that society, along with the deity or the authority figure, hold each other accountable for those rules. Stories like the flood story show us what could happen if that system just completely breaks down. If nobody teaches other people about those rules, if everybody stops holding each other accountable, if they stop contributing to the good of society, and if those rules were no longer followed.
So based on these things, we have to know that there was a set of values or rules in the time of Noah, and so in the flood. And so in Scripture, in Genesis 6, we read this. The Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intention of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And the Lord was sorry that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him to his heart. This is pretty powerful, right? Some pretty strong words saying that God grieved in his heart that he had made man. It's a little bit crushing. But the part before that, Lord saw the wickedness of man. And when you look at history, when you look at culture, and back at what Allie said, there was some set of rules, some set of expectations or moral code that all of them were expected to live by. And so there was a determination of this is wicked and this is not. And so based on this, it is saying man was wicked, and it was everywhere, right? The specific word, wicked, is pretty, overarching. It could include a lot of different things. So I did some research, and it points to more specific words in general, like lawlessness, robbery, idolatry, and different forms of sexual immorality. So other verses in the surrounding text also say that the world was corrupt and the world was violent. And so all of these different words are kind of just explaining some different things that were going on at the time. And so we know that as a result of them being called wickedness, that these were things that were in rebellion to the accepted values, beliefs, and customs of the day. Okay, so we can say this is against what was allowed. Okay, so let's look at Noah. Genesis 6:9 in the ESV says, Noah was a righteous man, blameless in his generation. Noah walked with God. The Complete Jewish Bible translated it as, Noah was a man righteous and wholehearted. So when I was thinking about all of this, and I was thinking about Noah, I'm thinking about all those other people on the earth, and I'm like, how can Noah be this island? And so I'm thinking he had to have, friendships, relationships with people around him. And so this was kind of my normal thought. Somehow he managed to stay blameless and righteous, but I still kind of assumed he had some interaction. And maybe just had some even good relationships with the people around him. So I looked up the word blameless in Hebrew, and it specifically says blameless is considered of someone who does not associate with the wicked. So then I go back to maybe Noah had no friends. And I'm like, well, that's sad, but maybe it's a reality. I don't know. But the definition of a word means he doesn't associate with the wicked, and the wickedness of man was great in the earth. So maybe he was a lone ranger in that aspect. So we know that Noah and his family, kind of by default, were the lone human family that was chosen to survive the flood. So they built the boat, and based on all of this, people look at Noah in different ways, and they say different things about him. Walt always says, I think Noah got a bad rap, because some people will say, well, maybe Noah wasn't exactly as the text said. Maybe he wasn't blameless, which in this context, maybe the definition is a little bit different than what we would say as blameless. But maybe some people would say, well, he's like the best of the worst, right? If everyone else was terrible, maybe he was just the best one. I don't know. Or we could say he really was righteous. He really was blameless, just as the text stated. Or I found a third option, where I'm just going to throw this out there for the sake of history. I found it interesting. So there is a book called the Book of Enoch, which is not in the canon. It's an ancient Hebrew apocalyptic religious text. Take that as you want it. But the book of Enoch suggests that the only reason Noah was saved was because of his lineage, right? So Noah was a direct descendant, many times over, from Seth, the son of Adam and Eve, right? And due to a lot of the wickedness was sexual immorality, and so there was a lot of adultery going on. And the book of Enoch suggests that the only reason that Noah was saved was because the lineage from Seth to Noah was considered pure. So, just an interesting thing that I found. Maybe it's all of the above. So, regardless of what you believe or what you're thinking in your head, we can look at this and we know that what was going on was bad enough for God to say, all right, we're going to destroy humanity and we're going to start over, right? We're going to do a reset. And I think for me, this is a consequence that is really hard to fathom. You know, I look at today's world and there are a lot of things that I wish did not exist. You know, there are a lot of things that I wish we could just start over and that we could just, you know, maybe start in a different time, you know, maybe a different set of morals, or if we could just wipe something out completely. But I really cannot fathom starting completely over. I don't even know what that would look like. And I couldn't imagine being someone in Noah's family really just starting from having no one around you when you get off that ark. So this humanity reset that when the flood came was just a whole new level to me, a whole new level. So I went back to, how did it get so bad? And I don't necessarily have like a biblical answer for this, but I look at our world and I say, how does something ever get that bad? You know, we can look at things and you can take your pick. You know, there are things of this world that you think this is terrible. And maybe it's something that someone does intentionally, maybe not. But how does it get that way, right? And where does it start? And I think in general, it starts with one typical sin, right? When we get to the point of wicked, it all starts somewhere. And so it starts with one sin. And so I thought about, okay, how do we get to that point? And in general, whether it's me, whether it's you, we might do something once, right? And maybe it doesn't matter what it is, right? Maybe it's a lie, maybe it's stealing something, maybe it's cheating. But when you do it once, isn't it easier to do it again? And then isn't it easier to do it another time and another time and another time? Because you kind of get used to it, right? And you maybe even convince yourself that it's not that bad. Maybe you're not hurting anyone, or you think you're not hurting anyone. And so we have I don't know, you can call it the domino effect, or maybe it's the ripple effect because it does affect the people around you. But in general, things tend to get worse and worse and worse. And so I think we get to the point where we sometimes just can't see truth anymore, right? And sometimes, sometimes maybe you catch it before it gets out of control or before it gets that bad. And sometimes we don't, right? Maybe you have a lot of willpower, and when you get caught up in something, maybe you're just like, all right, I'm done. I'm going to stop, and everything's going to be fine, and I'm going to repent, and I'm not going to do it anymore. Maybe that's you. But for the rest of us, right, it's usually not so easy, right? And in general, I think most of our sin does affect other people, right? We like to think that it doesn't, but if you have a family, then it's going to affect them on some level, right? If you have people that you are close friends with, it's going to affect them. If you have a community of people around you, eventually it's going to affect them. And so it gets bigger and it gets bigger. when it's not dealt with. And so when I think about that, and I think about how do we keep things from getting so bad, I think about how, like, what can we do in order to prevent that, right? We all have different relationships with people in this room. And I think, in my opinion, this group has a unique, advantage to a lot of spiritual communities, right? We are a little bit smaller, which you could think that's good or bad. I think in a lot of ways it's really good because we have deeper relationships, because there's not very many places to hide, right? If you stick around, then you're going to get to know people below the surface, and you're going to have deeper conversations with them. You're going to have, hopefully, authentic relationships, and they're going to know you outside of this building, right? And so I think in general we are a committed group of people. We are committed to doing good in the community. We are committed to spreading joy and to helping each other and doing life together. And so when it comes to that, I think if you look around, if you've spent any time here, there are probably a few people in this room that you would allow to get into your business a little bit. And I know nobody really likes people to get into their business, right? Because you say, it's mine, stay away, here's my little wall, you stay on the other side of it. But if you have a relationship in this room, or a couple, and it's got a little depth to it, right, then you're going to give people permission to get in your business, right? And not only that, but hopefully it's reciprocal as well, and they have and you have permission to get in their business a little bit, right? And so when I'm thinking about how do we combat sin, or even the maybe like the inkling of sin in our community, because it all kind of starts with a thought, right? And I was thinking about this when we were singing earlier. I was a pretty good kid growing up, and I say this probably only because of the grace of God, because every time I tried to do something bad, I didn't get caught. I got, like, something happened that, like, sent me the other way. Like, literally like a bumper of you're trying to go this way and you get shot back the other way. And it was like, there are multiple instances, especially in like high school, that I can see where I was like, oh, okay, I'm going to make this choice. I'm just going to veer off this like path, and you just get shot back the other way. And I'm like, this is unreal. So it has to be God, because because it's like different people, different circumstances, and so, but it's just proof. It all starts with like a thought, right? Oh, I'm going to do this, but okay. But maybe you never get the chance. And so I think that, when we're a community and we know what's going on in people's lives, we have the opportunity to speak in, and we have the opportunity just to know how people are, because when we are struggling, that is the point where in general we end up making mistakes, right? Where we end up going down that path that we don't want to go down. And so my encouragement to all of us as a community is know your people, know who you're going to let speak into your life, and and make sure that they know that they are allowed to speak into yours, because not everyone has this, right? Not everyone has a community and has genuine friendships of, being able to come to someone and say, hey, I noticed that you're struggling. How can I help? It's not like you have to, hey, but have a real conversation with someone, and they're not going to turn and walk away from you, or they're not going to feel judged, or, we have those relationships that you can genuinely carry one another's burdens and walk through that with them. And so my encouragement is first to just have the hard conversation, right? If you know that someone is struggling, whether you think it's a thought, whether you know it's a fact, whether it's a pattern and you've noticed it, have the hard conversation. You know, they might have been waiting for someone to say something for a really long time. And that is one of my pet peeves. Have you ever had somebody come up to you and say, you know, you said something a few weeks ago and you really offended me with what you said? You know, and my first reaction is, oh my gosh, but I'm so sorry, what did I say? You know, and then my second response is what? It was weeks ago. Why didn't you tell me 2 weeks ago? You know, and so I say that of have the hard conversation, but also don't wait to have the hard conversation, right? Because you're just, you know, if in general, when somebody says something that is hurtful, you know, often it comes as a result of maybe they are hurting, maybe they are struggling, and so maybe the conversation just gives them an outlet to share. I'm sorry, it wasn't about you, it was about me, I'm struggling, whatever. And so have the hard conversations, don't be afraid of them. You know, when you have relationships with people, I know confrontation is hard in general, right? Nobody likes to do it, but I also find that when it comes from a genuine, caring heart, that people receive it much better. And so don't be afraid, and don't wait. Allie said at the end, she said, stories, I'm just going to quote her, stories like the flood story show us what could happen if everyone stopped contributing to the good of society, if those rules were no longer followed. And when I was reading her notes last week, this is the one that really stuck out to me, because I look at this wickedness, right, that was in that day, and I think we all know that it starts with something small and it gets bigger. And I think this is a lot of what we see today, right? And you know, and really one of our mottos of being the good, right? Camp Hope, be the good. And I think that we can look around us and we can see the effects of this right now, of people not contributing to the good of others. And whether it's in action, sometimes just whether it's in speech and things that they're saying, but there is a lot of division. And so I think we as a community want to seek to continue contributing to the good so that we can be the Noahs of today, right? That we can be seen as righteous, that we can be seen as blameless, but that we can also be that for each other, right? That we can encourage each other and that we can be on this journey together on the path of the right way, right? And not of the wrong way. And so I do hope that you can look around this room, and I hope that you can see a few people in here that you'll let get in your business.